There is no possible way that I'm gonna put a 20 amp breaker on a 14 gauge wire. All right, so now we're gonna start tearing this panel apart. The quickest and easiest way is to just cut everything, right? Make sure you have a trash box right next to you unless you're trying to save the breakers, right? But I just get in here and clip everything out. That's the fastest way to handle it. And then even the same thing with the grounds and the neutrals. Rather than taking the time to try and, loosen every single little screw, just go through here and clip every wire. What you guys see here now, I take every single wire and I separate the ground, the neutral, and the hot from themselves. So this one's all by itself. So I'm gonna take care of this. I usually just use the dikes to pull these staples out, get it out of the way. Make sure that you're careful, because if you nick this wire and it's too short, that's a really big bummer, because we're gonna end up having to either re-pull this circuit or put a junction box in here, and nobody wants a junction box in a hallway. So on these connectors right here, come down over here so they can see. On these connectors, the quickest way that I've found to get these out is to just clip this blue bar right here, and then it comes right out. You guys see that? So we're gonna do that with all of these. Some of them are facing the wrong direction, so it makes it a little bit of a challenge. But if you can just get that bar out of the way, right? It makes it much easier to get these out of here. And we want to be really careful that we're not damaging them as we're going. Get these up and out. We want to try and be careful. I'm kind of pulling on them quite a bit, but just try and be careful that we're not damaging the Romex as we pull it out, right? If you can see, by separating each one of the wires by themselves, whatever wires in each Romex, it really helps to get these to come out of these holes really easy. I used to struggle with them so much until we finally figured out that little trick there. If you guys have any other tricks, if you guys see that I'm doing anything wrong in the video, please. I'm here to learn just as much as you guys are, so I'd really like it if you guys could let me know, hey, we use this tool or this tool, especially coming from different parts of the country. I know that everybody, and even the world, we all use different tools and have different things that we use to get the job done. So, all right, so we got that. I want to bend these up and out of the way so I can work on the panel without these being in the way. So we're just gonna pop these screws out, right? Trash box. Get these all out of here. Now, right now I'm thinking about the height of the panel when I put the new one in. I usually like to go, sometimes I'll match whatever the existing one is, just because whoever's living here is already used to that height. Not that they really probably use it that much, but so 5'6" about, 5'6 3/4. I like putting them at 5'5". That's my preferred height for sub panels. In commercial, we always did 6 feet. But here, this is what we got. So I want to check my opening next to make sure 14 3/8 about. Yeah, so we need to pull this stud off right here. So we went ahead and just took that stud off, and that gives us our exact, it's 14.5, which is an eighth longer than we want it, which is actually really nice. So 14 3/8. So what I like to do here is I'll lay out the top of our panel where I want it. 5'6", dead on. And I'll do this other side. 5'6". So on this panel here, this is a newer panel that I've seen come out, and I actually really like it. So we're trying to get this mounted. What I want to do here is they do give us these little knockouts. We see this right here. You give us these little knockouts for the screws. I don't like them because they're a little too far forward. So what I always do is I just take my drill and I go find a center spot. Make sure nothing's on the other side. Just give me a hole. Wallow it out so it's nice and clean. Do the next one. Flip it over. Let's get these ones next. Clean it out a little bit. This one as well. Then I have my layout. Then I'll grab one screw. I like to use the pan heads for this. If we're doing a service change on someone's house, these are not appropriate. We use the nice hex heads, at least 3 inches long. That's what our city inspectors want to see here. But for a sub panel, these are sufficient. So this is a 2-inch pan head wood screw. So I'm just going to hold this up here. And I'm just going to tack it so that I can work on it. Try and line it up where I think we're going to hit. I always go about a 1/2 inch out because the drywall that they're going to be installing here is 5/8. So we get that lined up pretty close. And this first one is just to tack it up so I can work on it. The next one, I'm actually going to put a tape measure on it so that we have the right measurement of where we need to be at. So here we go. You can also screw up a piece of drywall right here. I don't have any here, and I'm not going to go buy some just to do that. You can screw a piece of drywall right here so that you know. I like to be no more than 1/8 behind the drywall. You don't want to be more than that. So we got our 1/2 inch here. I'm going to hold that in right there. Now, as you're screwing the screw, if you're at an angle, it's going to want to pull the panel backwards. So you want to make sure that you, with your finger, just pull out a little bit more and then come in so that when it sucks the panel back, it's right where you want it to be. There we go. Just behind a 1/2 inch there. I'm good with that. So then we go the bottom corner. We're right at a 1/2 there. And these ones, now that you got 2 screws in, it's not really going to move much. There we go. We got another screw. Try and screw it straight if you can, so you don't have to deal with the panel moving forward or backwards. There's that one. Then we're going to get this one in. There you go. You want to make sure, too, if your opening of the studs is wider than the width of your panel, that you don't want to suck it in and really bow out the side of this panel. Here, it's pretty much exact. So, all right. Now we got our panel set. The next step, again, that wire's hot. So we're not going to work on that at all right now. We're going to get all these circuits back in here. And I like to start from left to right or right to left to make sure that we get all these in there. Come up here so we can see. It has these notches and these knockouts so that you can slide wires in there. The amount of knockouts that you have there is the amount of wires that you're supposed to put in there. You're not supposed to shove them all in there, put 10 in one little slot. So I know I'm going to at least fill that one. And then I'm going to break all these out too, right here. So we're going to go get all these up and through now, where we need them to be. All right, so I want to start landing these in the panel. So I'm going to do this big one first. I always like to get the big ones out of the way. So we're just going to knock that 1/2 inch open for this one. So we have these push-in plastic bushings. There's lots of different types that you can use. These are just the ones that we use in this area. For the bigger wire, I typically take this and I'll cut just a little bit off of this. Right there like that, just to make it easier. It's not a sharp edge, so it's fine. There's no issue there. So I pop that in there, and then we want to get our circuit nice and neat. Go into the panel. Run this through nice and careful. And I like to leave just a little bit of slack. I don't want it to be super taut, you know what I mean? You want to leave some slack. And then I'll start from, like I said, left to right, and we just slip these wires in here. Nice and careful. They kind of go in a V shape so that they don't move. Pull it tight and then go up a little bit and give yourself some room so that it can move, because we have to strap all these. There we go. That's 3. The next one, pop that in there. Next one. You know, workmanship for me is extremely important. I try and teach my guys, and they're really good at it as well. Cleanliness on the job site and just your workmanship, right? I mean, this is everything that we have to show for when we're doing a panel, or when we're, you know, even making up receptacles. But yeah, your workmanship, you know, it's critical. We got inspectors showing up, and I found that if they show up and they see bad workmanship, it just puts them on edge. You know, the first thing that they're gonna think is, they did this bad, what else is wrong? You know, their workmanship in this area is wrong, and it's just literally, it's just causing you problems. There's no sense in giving yourself that unnecessary hassle when we could just do good workmanship. I know I could go through and open all of these up, so we just have 4 left, but I was trying to make sure that I don't open up, because you have to put these special blanks in there if you open too many of them up, and I didn't really want to have to deal with that. So just make sure you're doing it one at a time. Take your time. You don't have to go super fast, especially you guys, your apprentices out there who are learning. If you can learn to have good workmanship at a slow pace, you're gonna get faster. You're gonna get faster. It's gonna take time, but learn good workmanship now when you're young, right? So that you end up with really good work and you're really efficient at it and really quick. So the next thing that Square D has for us here, and this is not a sponsored video, I just like using Square D. I used it for 14 years while I was in commercial, pretty much exclusively using Square D panels, commercial bolt-on. I really like their residential panels as well. So these panels right here have these special covers that go over the wires once you get them in there. You notice you got the V shape right here. That follows the contour of the wires, how you installed them in there. So make sure that that lines up, and that should just pop right in there like that. Make sure that you break this tab off, especially if you have wires in there. This one, I believe, will be fine. Yep. And just make sure that these 2 tabs here just click. There we go. We got that in, and now you're set, and that's nice and flush. They're pretty efficient panels, if you ask me. All right, so the next step, labeling and stripping these wires. As you can see, these ones are already stripped out, so we're good on these. I'm gonna fold these up and out of the way so that I don't have to deal with them while I'm working. Once I have these out of the way, then I can start with my labeling and my stripping. So all these wires already have a label on them. So I wanna save that label. So I use these Romex strippers. They're shaped for the Romex. You still don't wanna go down too tight with them because it'll score them, but we're at the end of the wire, so it doesn't really matter that much. But just as a good practice, I just score them just a little bit, and then I can pull this off. Now I have this label, and I wanna save this label. Don't get ahead of yourself. Make sure that you're taking the time here, because you do not wanna lose the labeling, or you're gonna have to go tone everything out and try and figure out where it goes. So to strip these out, I just take a blade at the end, and I just cut it, strip it straight down like that. And then I usually stand back to get some pressure on it, and you can just pull it, just like that, right? You get that open. I get it all the way up till I'm about, I don't know, inch or so into the panel, and then make sure that you don't catch any of the wires when you're cutting. You're gonna have to re-pull that home run if you do that. So we wanna keep that label so that we can then take it and slide it all the way over all these wires. I've seen some guys, they like to just put it over the hot wire, the black or the red, whatever color it is. I like to do all three. We do each one of these using these Romex strippers. Save our label. Take your knife, score it, get a little pressure on the wire, and strip it. Just like that. Nice and easy. This way, we have identification and we didn't have to spend a bunch of time putting numbers on it or wrapping white tape and having to write with a Sharpie. If we already have that label, you're set. So here we have a wire that's too long that's in the panel and it's already pretty close. So I just wanted to show you guys how I do this. I take the blade backwards so I don't catch the wire and split it open. And then if you have enough, you should be able to grab it and it'll just pull open to your 1 inch. And then you strip this out here and you cut it. This one didn't have a label on it, so we are gonna tone this one out or just follow the wire wherever it goes. So we went ahead and just got all of them done really quick so you guys didn't have to watch all of that. It's all the same thing. Strip them out. Make sure your labels are visible up here, right? And then we're good. So then I'm gonna move these out of the way. At this point, I wanna put the ground bar in. So when you're installing a ground bar, just take the screw that comes in the kit and you can see it shows ground right there on the panel, that ground symbol right there. So you need to make sure you pick the right holes for this to line up and get that on there. Start the first one. Don't tighten it all the way down until you get the second one started. Get that in there and get it tight. In a sub panel, you have to have a ground bar. The bond is done at the main switchgear. We cannot do that in here. They have to be separated, otherwise it poses a safety issue. All right, so we have the ground bars in and we're ready to start landing the wires and training them in the panel the way that we want them. So what I always do, I like to start with the ground wires and I'll take all the wires and push them up into this back corner where it'll line up and I can get the wires landed over there on the ground bar. So we'll kind of push everything up and over and then separate our grounds out from here and then push everything up to the side. And then what I do, double check you got all the grounds and I'll put a zip tie around all the way at the top. Just like this. That way it's gonna hold those grounds together nice and neat. And then I'll do a second one, if you can see, right about here before I have to start turning them in. So we'll grab a second zip tie and get that on there. Just like that. Kind of line that up right there. Give yourself a little space so you can work with it. Get these up out of your way. Clip these zip ties out of here so we can all see. All right, next, I'll start landing my grounds. So I like to start with the ones closest, kind of get these trained well so that they look good, right? Again, craftsmanship, we want to make sure that our work looks good. So I'm going to get that in there, clip it right there, slide it in. Now, we're going to torque these, but what I want to do to start is just get them all set, right? So I just want to get them set in their slot so they're not going to move. If you notice, I'm using this special tip right here for these panel screws, and it also works for the breakers. It doesn't work for the main line lugs right there. It doesn't work for that. Obviously that's a slotted, but this tip right here works great. So put it in there, just give it a little snug. And then I put my finger there and I bend the next one. So it's put my thumb on it and I'll clip it. So you start by getting them up into the corner, zip tie them here and here, just like that. And we're gonna do the same with the neutrals, and then we'll eventually end up doing the same thing with the hots. All right, so we have all of our grounds and our neutrals landed except for a few of the neutrals. So come over here. On this side, what we don't wanna do is land all of these neutrals right here because it's gonna block these screws. So I wanted to go over real quick the torquing of these and show you guys. So we have a torque screwdriver right here. We checked the manufacturer. It's on the stickers for the ground bars as well as for the neutral bar that we need to be at 20 inch-pounds. So you set your gauge here to 20, and then we're just gonna take this and turn it until it clicks. Once we have that, that's 20. There we go. And you're just gonna do that all the way down. So you do that to every single one of these. Go through, double check it, make sure that your torque is good. And then we can land all the rest of the neutrals. So we have all of our neutrals and our grounds landed on both sides. And if you can see, we can get to every one of the screws. So a good practice is to make sure that you're not blocking any of the screws with any of the wires. So the neutrals all have space here, but then as soon as I got to this last one, I kind of formed them to come in so that it's nice and clean. One other thing that I forgot to mention, we do need to label the black wires. So you can see we have our labels up here, but we do need to label the black wires so that when we put the breakers in, we can turn them in and be able to label them what they are. When we do that, I like to take some white tape, do a couple wraps, and then rip it and fold it back on itself. And then you can write in what it is. This one is fireplace receptacle. So I'm just gonna put FP. Now, when I go to put the breakers in and I land each wire, we're also gonna create a schematic. So breaker 1 is gonna be fireplace, right? Breaker 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. They're each going to be labeled on here as we cut them so that we have a template and a diagram that shows us so that we can P-touch them later and we know exactly which breaker goes where. We found that this works really well so that you don't end up having to run around the whole house trying to tone out different circuits and figure out which one goes where. What we're looking at here, when you go to start landing a replacement sub panel, or let's say you're doing a main panel upgrade on someone's house, some of your wires are obviously going to be shorter than others. So you need to make sure that you're landing your shortest wires first. Otherwise, you're going to end up with wire nuts and splices. These are our 3 shortest on this side. So I'm going to train those ones ready to go into these first 3 slots right here. Same thing on this side. You can see these shorter wires. We want to make sure that we're going to land those ones first. I do not like wire nuts in an electrical panel. So we want to make sure we land these first. So another key thing is we need to make sure that no matter what breaker was installed on an existing wire previously, that we put the appropriate size breaker in now, right? So we know that these are 14 gauge wire, the white. We know that these yellow here are 12 gauge. So there is no possible way that I'm going to put a 20 amp breaker on a 14 gauge wire. That is our responsibility here. If that ends up tripping something downstream at someone's house, then we need to assess that problem over there. What are they plugging in that's causing the breaker to trip? So I know that these 3 short wires are 14 gauge. The way you can check that too is obviously on your strippers. These are my favorite strippers. I know that there's some, Milwaukee has some, other companies have some. These are my favorite because they're the shortest. I found in my almost 20 years, 17 years experience, the closer the stripper holes are to my hand, the easier it is for me to strip, right? So I like to use these ones but you're gonna have your own personal preference. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think your favorite strippers are. So an easy check is go to the 14 gauge hole. It's hard to see, but this is 10, 12, 14. It's a perfect strip. If you go to a number 12 though, we know that that one's gonna strip on number 12. So that's a good easy check. Make sure you're going in the right hole on that. So here, we know that this is a 15 amp breaker that we need on this one. So again, zip tie. We're gonna put zip ties on these. I wanna get all of these zip tied together nice and clean. Here we go. Put this on there. And then I'm gonna leave those two together because that's a 2-pole breaker that we need to add there. So those are nice and neat. And then I'm gonna grab my short ones right here. And I'm gonna, again, try and have good craftsmanship here and train these wires to where they're gonna look the nicest, right? So that's pretty close right there. Those 3 are ready to be landed. So in this panel, we have single pole breakers and then we have tandem breakers. Right here, this panel, this notch here in the center, if you guys see this, right here, this notch, some panels, that's filled in right here, all the way across. There's nothing here. If there's a notch in it, you're allowed to put a tandem breaker in here. If you notice how far down the plastic comes here, that's a stop, so that you're not allowed to put that in a slot where you have the metal, the aluminum all the way filled in here. So for this panel, we can use tandems all the way throughout. This panel is a 20-40, so it's 20 spaces, 10 on each side, but you can put tandems in every single slot, so that can enable you to use 40 circuits total. So when we put this in, we have the notch here on the back that needs to line up right in between these holes here, right over those ones. So it literally clips right over. It doesn't actually clip, but it just sits there. Now when you go to install a breaker, you need to hold pressure to the left, okay? Or if you're on this side, you need to hold pressure to the right. You need to make sure it's all the way in there. A lot of times people, it's not all the way in there and then they go to slam it in and it's not seated. You need to seat it over, come over nice and clean, with pressure still pushing that way with this thumb right here, and then slam it in. I like to try it 1 or 2 times to make sure I really got it in there good. That one's ready to go. The same thing with a single pole regular breaker, not a tandem. The difference here, look here how high this goes. The other one is way down. This one goes way up. This one can go in the slot where you have the metal filled in the hole all the way. So if you notice, they want to make sure that you don't put tandems in spaces where you're not supposed to. So again, we're going to put this tandem in here. I want to use tandems here. Put that in there. Now when we go to land our wires, the tandem breakers, the square D ones, they have smaller screws for the tandems. You'll notice that this one, you can use that special tip I was talking about to loosen that up, right? But you can't use that screwdriver in here. It's a slotted screw. So you need to get the small one, like a 3/16 slotted screw. And then I'll always check to make sure they're a little bit loose. Don't loosen them too much because the screws will come out and they're not the easiest to get back in. So just make sure they're open. Then I grab my first circuit. I put my finger here again and I train it up, right? And then this is where I cut it, right at that mark. I cut it right there. So I'll take my finger and then my dikes, clip it. And then make sure you're using the right hole, okay? You don't want to get it wrong. If you use a smaller one than what the gauge of the wire is, you're going to score it and you're going to weaken that copper. So make sure for this one it's 14 gauge, so I'm going to the 3rd slot. And also, you don't want to strip too much. I see a lot of times guys have copper stripped out, you know, like a full inch, and then the copper is showing outside of the breaker. You don't want that. So then you get this in here, slide it in your hole. Now this is key. This is what I tell my guys all the time. Whenever you're tightening any termination, keep pressure in on the wire, pushing it whatever direction. If it's going into these lugs here, keep it pushed down, right? This one, not so, it doesn't matter, just make sure you're through here. But on this one, keep the pressure over. What I've found is if you don't hold it and you tighten it down, sometimes it wants to slip out as it's spinning. So I want to hold it and I'm pushing it all the way to the back. If you notice, not in this one, but in this one, there's a curve on the back of the breaker where you slide the wire in. I want it dead center of that curve, straight to the back. I don't want it up too high and I don't want it down too low. I want to make sure that that screw is tightening right on it. So push it down and then keep pressure this way. You can't see it, but I'm pushing this way as I'm tightening it. And then we grab it here and we tighten it down. And again, don't tighten it too much because we need to torque all of these terminations. So just get it snug, make sure it's in there, nice and good, and it's not going to move. So we're going to do all the rest of these and then we'll come right back. So we have all of our wires landed. All the breakers are set in their slots. The neutrals are in, the grounds are in. So now we want to make sure that we torque all the breakers. So one thing to keep in mind is that the 2-pole breakers and the single pole breakers have a different torque rating than the tandem breakers. So these are set at 36 inch-pounds is what it says on the side of the breaker, and these are 25. So make sure that you're not over tightening because you just assumed that all Homeline breakers are exactly the same. So we're going to go ahead and torque these. And you'll feel the torque wrench again slip over itself, and you'll know that that's when you're tight. Right there, just like that. Then we do the next one. That one's good. And then this one. Good. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to support all of our wires within 12 inches of the panel can. So what we did is we took a stud, screwed it across, and then we used a stapler very carefully, making sure that we didn't nick any of the wires as we were using it, stapled them all down. These ones we had to double up, which is still an approved means. We can't go really much more than that because the staple won't hold. But we put these in, and then for the feeder, we wrapped some Romex sheathing on there and we screwed it down. So it's all good.